Hi, I'm the Stock Retro Gamer, and welcome to my video on first-person shooter firsts. First-person shooters have been around for over 30 years, and it's fair to say they've come a long way since the early 90s when they were popularised. Many innovations and improvements have been made in that 30 years that have become a staple of the genre. But this video is all about the very first-person shooter games to pioneer those innovations and techniques, and pave the way for greater days to come. Here is a list of FPS firsts, starting with... Now, the idea of seeing your weapon to either the left or right side of the screen is very much a standard of the genre at this point. But this wasn't always the case, as you can see in games such as Doom, Quake and Wolfenstein 3D, where your weapon is dead center. Released in 1995 and developed by LucasArts, Star Wars Dark Forces is a Star Wars first-person shooter, originally released on MS-DOS and then PlayStation. You play as Kyle Katarn, a mercenary working for the Rebel Alliance. Star Wars Dark Forces was the first FPS to use the offset weapon view, as you can see here in this footage. Dark Forces used the Jedi game engine, which was specifically designed for the game. This enabled levels with multiple floors, which was innovative at the time. Dark Forces can also boast being the first FPS where the player can look up and down, and jump, which makes it a milestone in the FPS genre. What's better in an FPS than taking down your enemies with your favourite gun? That's right, taking down your enemies with one of these guns in each hand. The dual wield feature is now commonplace and can be seen in many of the FPS titles of the last 20 years, including the Halo series, Counter-Strike and Wolfenstein New Order. Released in 1994 and developed by then Apogee Software, which later became 3D Realms, Rise of the Triad is a first-person shooter released on MS-DOS where you can play as 5 different characters, sent to investigate a deadly cult. Rise of the Triad was one of 2 FPS games to use the dual wield, as you can see here, allowing you to use 2 pistols at once. Doesn't seem like much now, but at the time this would have blown your mind. The other, which happened to be released on the exact same day, is Bungie's Marathon. Rise of the Triad can also lay claim to be the first FPS where you can play as a woman.
A woman?
No first-person shooter would be complete without your trusty boomstick to rely on. The shotgun is pretty much a must when it comes to your arsenal in an FPS, be it a single barrel, automatic or sawn-off. You're almost always bound to come across one. Released in 1993 and developed by id Software, Doom is a first-person shooter originally released on MS-DOS, which has you playing as simply Doom Guy, a space marine with a simple task, to kill demons with whatever he can. If you're watching this, then you're probably aware of how important Doom was in the FPS genre, and did so many things first. One of these being the use of a shotgun, and boy was it something. The noise it made, the reload animation, the damage it dealt out. Doom didn't just pioneer shotguns in FPS's, it knocked it out the park. Bullet holes. It's the little things in games that make the difference. To think there are still FPS games where you can shoot stuff and it doesn't leave a bullet hole. When I first saw bullet holes, I lost my mind. Seeing holes in the wall after you shot it really added a layer of realism to the game. It was also very satisfying to see your bullet masterpiece. This one again goes to Rise of the Triad, released in 1994, as you can see here. I was tempted to tack bullet holes onto the previous mention of Rise of the Triad, but really think they deserved their own piece for how important they were in the genre. I think for a lot of people Goldeneye was their first experience of this, but I'm afraid Rise of the Triad beat Bond to it by 3 years. This kind of realism led to some great FPS's with destructible environments, such as Half-Life 2 and Black. Now you think when it comes to the number of guns you have in a first-person shooter, the more the merrier, right? Wrong. Some games were brave and said no to this concept, choosing to limit the player to only carry 2 guns at a time, meaning the player must choose and make sacrifices in order to beat the game. This strategy can be seen in such games as Bioshock Infinite, Prey, and Far Cry 2. Released in 2001 and developed by Bungie, Halo Combat Evolved is a first-person shooter released for the Xbox and later PC that has you playing as Master Chief, a genetically modified super soldier whose task it is to destroy the Covenant, a collection of alien races who worship Halo. I could probably do a long list on things Halo pioneered, but a big contribution it made to the FPS genre was being the first to adopt the only 2 gun rule. Only having the ability to carry 2 guns meant making tough choices for the battle ahead. You could always swap them out with an enemy weapon, or something one of your team was carrying. It also added some realism to the combat, as carrying multiple large weapons didn't seem likely. The grenade mechanics was great too, having a separate button to throw them at your pleasure, instead of having to change your weapon to the grenades. This really gave the action segment some momentum. At the time, 2 guns only was probably seen as a risk on the devs' part, but one that paid off in spades. This really hit home that less could be more. As first-person shooters evolved, they began to get more realistic in lots of ways, such as health management, destructible environments, and enemy AI. Enemy animations have improved vastly, not being limited to just shooting and dying. They began to look more realistic in how they moved and reacted to your gunfire and explosions. Released in 1997 and developed by Rare, Goldeneye is a first-person shooter released for the N64 where you play as James Bond, the suave MI6 agent. Now, no introduction is needed on Goldeneye. The game didn't boast the most firsts in the genre, but it refined many features of the FPS with its smooth gameplay and fun game mechanics. One first it can boast is being the first FPS with accurate hit detection reactions, and boy were they fun. Your enemies when shot would have many different animations dependent where on the body they were hit. Headshots would be an instant kill, as it should be. Leg shots would make them stumble and sometimes hop. A lucky crotch shot would make them do this. Innovation such as this is what Goldeneye is looked back at fondly and high up on many greatest FPS lists. Being able to see your enemies in 3D is pretty much the standard for the last 25 years of first-person shooters. This wasn't always the case with early titles such as Doom and Heretic, using 2.5D sprites in their games. They would use optical trickery such as having enemy corpses and certain objects always face you wherever you are, as well as designing the levels in a certain way, making them appear 3D. Released in 1996 and developed by id Software, Quake is a first-person shooter originally released on PC, and very much in the same vein as Doom, where you play a marine taking down hordes of demons with kick-ass weapons. Where it differs from Doom is the environment is completely 3D, as opposed to 2.5D, which includes the enemies. The Quake engine meant enemies were fully 3D polygonal models instead of 2.5D sprites. This made for an overall more enjoyable experience, being able to see the depth and dimension of your victims. With advanced lighting effects and partial modding capabilities, Quake really raised the bar for what an FPS could be. Now you'd think a first-person shooter game that doesn't use guns doesn't really count. Imagine how brave you'd have to be to come out with the idea for an FPS with no guns in that boardroom. There have been several successful and highly praised FPS games where a gun isn't used, such as the Portal and the Thief series. Released in 1991 and developed by id Software, Catacombs 3D is a first-person shooter released on MS-DOS, where you take control of the High Wizard, Peton Everhale, whose task it is to defeat evil Lick Nemesis and rescue his girlfriend. Now, as you might have guessed, as a wizard in this game, you didn't have access to guns, but would use your hands to cast spells on your enemies and defeat them. Your attack choice was small, being limited to different strengths of Fireball. I do like how id Software used the player face image to determine your health, which can be seen in later titles like Wolfenstein 3D and Doom. Catacombs 3D is a simple and crude FPS, but can boast being the first to not feature any guns. These were some of the first-person shooters that dared to dream and push the boundaries of how an FPS should look and play. I do hope you enjoyed my list of FPS firsts. Obviously there are many more firsts to mention for possibly a future video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm the Stock Retro Gamer, and I'll catch you in the next one.